Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio. You're listening to the Jay Shapiro Show.
Hello, you're back again with Jay Shapiro. Thanks for listening. The election in the United States is still not formally over at this moment, but appears that Biden, the Democratic candidate, will be the next president. It's obviously too early to predict how the Biden administration will deal with the items like the Middle East, and all the so-called experts are making all kinds of predictions. Incidentally, all these predictions are based on the assumption that Biden will complete the 4-year term of office. Considering the state of his health as it looks in his public appearances, there's a real possibility that he will not complete his term. His place will be taken by Vice President Harris. And even if he completes his term, he'll be influenced by Harris. That being the case, I would like to note that one of the items on his busy agenda will be the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I'd like to share the following with the listeners. But Harris told an Arab American News in Michigan that the Biden administration will take immediate steps to restore economic and humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people, address the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, reopen the U.S. consulate in East Jerusalem, and work to reopen the PLO mission in Washington. Harris added, "We are committed to a two-state solution. We will oppose any unilateral steps that undermine that goal. We will also oppose annexation and settlement expansion." Biden has been an opponent of settlements for all of his nearly 50-year political career, so this is not surprising. This is the way his vice president speaks. Biden, as some of Biden's surrogates recently said, "I don't see any scenario where the Biden administration seeks to rescind the Taylor Force Act. That law prohibits the U.S. from providing aid to the Palestinian Authority as long as it continues to pay convicted terrorists and their families." But Harris said they would restore assistance to the Palestinian people. So I'd like the listeners to keep that in mind as things work themselves out. We don't know what's going to be, but there are some signs that are worrying. I'll be back after the break.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
You're listening to the Jay Shapiro Show.
You're back with Jay Shapiro. The dust still hasn't settled in the election in the United States, but I'd like to share a few observations about what would happen if the Biden ticket becomes the official one and Biden becomes the president. How will this affect what's happening here in the Middle East? Again, this is speculation, but based on the history of Joe Biden in the Obama administration and his background in general, I'd like to speculate about what could happen. The U.S. policy in the Middle East, especially the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and also Iran, is likely to undergo a very dramatic change. A Biden win ends any possibility that Trump's plan to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, known as the Peace to Prosperity Plan, it's also called the Deal of the Century, it will end if Biden is president. That plan, the Trump plan, had offered a radical break from past initiatives in that it allowed for Israel to eventually annex up to 70% of the West Bank and promised to recognize Israeli sovereignty over most of East Jerusalem. As part of the plan, Trump had also included the first ever published map of suggested borders for a two-state resolution to the conflict. This plan was unveiled only in January 2020, less than a year ago, and there was an invitation was made to the Palestinians to come and join in the negotiations, but that was rejected by the Palestinians. So what the Trump administration did was to push aside the initiative and in favor of doing something else, of prioritizing Israel-Arab normalization deals, such as the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan. In other words, making peace with other Arab countries before resolving the Palestinian issue was the Trump plan. In other words, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict would come at some later stage, if at all. Now, there is no time now between now and January to complete the plan, and Biden is not expected to adopt it. Another thing is, a Biden win removes any possibility whatsoever of unilateral West Bank annexation, even a minor one. As a matter of fact, Biden publicly said that he was upset by the United States moving its embassy to Jerusalem. Biden will not support any annexation plan, and the Trump administration is unlikely to move on it during the times left, only a few months, because his administration promised to suspend it in exchange for normal a relationship with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. In other words, the American government approved Israeli annexation of the Jordan Valley, but asked or told Israel not to do it in order not to mess up the agreements with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. So Biden will certainly want any sovereignty moves to wait until a final agreement is reached with the Palestinians, which of course may never come. Biden's map of a two-state solution is unlikely to include all the settlements, and as a result, the fear of future settlement evacuation and a possible settlement freeze now returns to the discourse. Under the Democrats, there probably would be a settlement freeze, as there was under the Obama administration. The settlers here in Israel and the right wing here in Israel had warned that the first 10 months of this year represented an unprecedented window of opportunity to enact the settlements. In other words, up until now. Now, that window of opportunity is now closed. Now, the Obama administration had held Israel liable for continuation of the conflict. The Obama administration held that its continued settlement activity was a stumbling block to peace. Now, the Trump administration changed that by 180 degrees. The Trump administration placed the onus for the conflict on a Palestinian Authority because it failed to negotiate and it continued incitement. It held in particular that terror was a stumbling block to peace, and it took the Palestinian Authority to task for its continued support of terror activity because, among other things, it paid individuals jailed for terror activities, and it gave money to family members of terrorists. Also, the Trump administration divorced settlement activity from the peace process, either with the Palestinians or with any other Arab states. That's a key difference. Now, under a Biden administration, the chances are that the onus will now flick back to Israel to resolve the frozen peace process, with renewed emphasis on the connection between the peace process and settlement building, which will once again become a stumbling block to peace. That's the way it is. There's no doubt that settlements will be, under the Biden administration, will be considered illegitimate. Biden will likely revert to Trump administration's upending of long-standing U.S. policy, which held that Israel activity over the pre-1967 lines in the West Bank and East Jerusalem was illegitimate. The Trump administration had recognized Israel's historic and religious rights to that area, while it never recognized Israel's sovereignty there. It held that such settlement activity was not inconsistent with international law, and the Trump administration allowed for the building and expansion of Jewish settlements. To underscore the deep Jewish roots in the territory, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman spoke of that area as Judea and Samaria, not as the West Bank. So there is strong possibility that all these problems that the Obama administration inflicted upon Israel will be resurrected. Now, what about the embassy? Biden is one of those persons who signed the U.S. Embassy Act of 1959 that recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and mandated that the U.S. Embassy be relocated to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. However, the embassy was only actually moved in 2018 under the Trump administration. Now, during the campaign for presidency, Biden said he had no intention of reversing that move. The Trump administration has actively campaigned and pushed a number of countries to move their embassies to Jerusalem. So if Biden takes over and Trump is out, that campaign will be ended. It is now very unlikely that other countries, even ones who had pledged to do so, will move their embassies to Jerusalem. I think, is what will happen. Now, a Biden win breathes new life into the Palestinian Authority, which had been on the verge of financial collapse. It's expected that a Biden administration would restore ties with the Palestinian Authority that had been severed during the Trump administration. Now, how will this manifest itself? Well, it would include reopening the PLO mission in Washington, which the Trump administration had closed, and also the Trump administration had closed U.S. Consulate General in Jerusalem that served the Palestinians. Now everything goes to the embassy in West Jerusalem. Biden is also expected to restore much of the financial assistance to both the Palestinians and the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which serves the Palestinian refugees. All of these things, the money to the PA and money to UNRWA, were cut by the Trump administration. The chances are that Biden will renew them. So what had happened is that the absence of these funds had created a financial crisis that was compounded by the pandemic, as well as the Palestinian Authority decision to protest Trump's peace initiative by refusing to accept the tax revenues which Israel had collected on its behalf. It had also cut security ties. Now, news of Biden's possible victory allows it to restore security ties with Israel and to receive the tax revenues. Officially, the response of the Palestinian Authority to a Trump defeat has been great joy and publicly. I'll say a few more words on this topic after the break. I'll be right back.
Hi everyone, this is Andrea Simento from Jerusalem, inviting you to drop everything and join me on my show, Pull Up a Chair. We'll visit this week's quirky stories, meet fabulous guests, and discover my Israel. Together we'll laugh, shout, and explain the topics that make us say, hey, we've got to talk about that. So get comfortable and pull up a chair with me, Andrea Simento, every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
We're back with Jay Shapiro. Before the break, I was speculating about how the administration under Democrats would be different than under Trump. And I want to continue along that speculation. One of the big things that happened under Trump was he got out of the 2015 Iran deal. The Biden win eliminates the Trump administration policy on Iran and very likely would restore it to that of the Obama administration, which had brokered a 2015 deal with Tehran to slow down its nuclear program. Trump withdrew the United States from that deal. That deal is known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It's always known by its initials, the JCPA. That was a deal between Iran and six world powers. It has reimposed U.S. sanctions on Iran. That's what Trump did, and fought to restore the international ones as well, including the arms embargo. But Trump was not too successful, and the European nations continue to ship arms to Iran. Now, what will probably happen is Biden will work to rejoin and revive the deal with Iran, which still has the support of other five world powers. The only one who pulled out of that deal was Trump and the United States. But now the United States will probably go back to the deal. With other UN Security Council members not respecting what the U.S. did, the UN arms embargo on Iraq expired last month. The Trump administration put additional sanctions on Iran to make up because of what the other parties didn't do. So the Iran deal will probably be stronger now. The America might join it again. The whole ideal was to make sure that there are consequences to the Islamic Republic's continued development of advanced weapons and its nuclear program. Iran and its likely sources of weaponry, which include China and Russia, have waited before making any arm deals to see what's going to happen in the American election. But now that it appears that the Democrats have won and Trump is out, they may feel emboldened to do what they want to do, because now the Trump and his maximum pressure sanctions campaign are on the way out. That is something probably that Biden will have to address immediately, because it affects the security of the world. In other words, the bottom line is that Trump pulled out of the deal with Iran. The European countries stayed in, and now there's a good possibility that under Biden, the U.S. will go back into the deal. Biden is expected to call on Iran to return to the terms of the deal, and in exchange to offer an American return to the deal. Biden has said he would negotiate to make the deal stronger, though he did not specify in what way. And the other parties in the deal, that is the European countries, are continuing as they did before, which may make any changes to the deal with Iran difficult, if not impossible. That's as far as Iran is concerned. That's a dangerous one for Israel. Another subject, by the way, talking about a Biden administration, has to do with the fight against anti-Semitism, particularly in the United States. While the vast majority of Democrats have thus far avoided the BDS, the boycott and so forth, a growing number of the Democratic Party's progressive wing oppose steps against the anti-Israel movement in the United States, in their argument that you cannot oppose the BDS on free speech grounds. People are allowed to speak freely. Biden is really, and when you think about it, a lot of people wanted to be the Democratic candidate, and Biden turned out to be the candidate because he was a compromise candidate. And he may want to maintain party unity and avoid provoking the anger of those to his left. Now, those to his left, including the so-called squad in the House of Representatives, significantly, those to his left includes the Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. Biden may want to put domestic policy first, but the world is not going to be at a standstill until he has time to address it, which means that Biden will have to be ready for any number of international issues, including those that have impact upon Israel. And again, as I said before, foremost of these international issues is Iran, which has a strong effect upon Israel. And that he indeed may return to that deal. And also, Biden's victory may slow down the momentum of countries normalizing ties with Israel, like the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan, which deals with Israel were negotiated by the Trump administration. Now, Biden and his campaign have expressed support for these developments, but the Trump administration particularly prioritized these moves and even put Israel-related elements into agreements with other countries like Sudan. Now, Biden is much less likely to do these things. So, in other words, Israel's bonding or making deals with Arab countries, which was advanced tremendously under the Trump administration, may slow down or even come to a halt. Biden has promised to put pressure on Saudi Arabia about human rights violations, but nothing really will come of that. But another thing which is not particularly urgent, but may come up under a Biden administration is the Israel-Palestinian conflict. There have not been serious peace talks in many years between Israel and the Palestinians. And on the other hand, the good part of that is there has been relatively little violence. Yet, during the campaign, the Vice President-elect Harris did the following, and I didn't get a big headline, but I want the listeners to know about. There is a large Arab population in Dearborn, Michigan, and they have an Arab American news. And Harris, the incoming vice president, told that newspaper that, and I quote, a Biden administration will take immediate steps to restore economic and humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people, address the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, reopen the U.S. consulate in East Jerusalem, and work to reopen the PLO mission in Washington. Now, that was pretty much under the headline. You didn't hear much about it. But as far as Israel is concerned, that was a very serious campaign promise. So, also, there is a law that prohibits the U.S. from providing aid to the Palestinian Authority as long as it continues to pay convicted terrorists and their families. That's called the Taylor Force Act. It was named there for an American who was visiting Israel, and he was killed by Palestinians, terrorists. But Harris, the incoming vice president, said that they would, and I quote, they would restore assistance to the Palestinian people, so perhaps they have some kind of loophole in mind. Harris also said the following: we are committed to a two-state solution. We will oppose any unilateral steps that undermine that goal. We will oppose annexation and settlement expansion by Israel. Now, Biden has been an opponent of settlements for all of his nearly 50-year political career, so that's not surprising. So there's a good possibility that settlements will likely come back in the headlines as a source of friction between Jerusalem and Washington, though we'll see what it'll be. When he comes into office, he's going to have a lot of items on his agenda, but a lot of them are going to affect Israel, and I'd like the listeners to be aware of it. Like everybody else who's supposed to be an expert, I've speculated, but I want to go on the record with the speculation. I'll be back after the break.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
You're back with Jay Shapiro. I want to say a few more things about the American election and how it affects Israel. Again, this is my opinion, and I guess my opinion is as good as anybody else's. I want to share it with the listeners. During the election campaign, Joe Biden's team announced its intention of rebuilding relations with the Palestinian Authority. This includes allowing a de facto Palestinian embassy, called the PLO Mission, to reopen in Washington, D.C., which Trump had closed, and a separate U.S. consul to serve the Palestinian population in the eastern part of Jerusalem. At present, the Palestinian Affairs Unit of the American government operates quietly out of a branch of the U.S. Embassy in the western section of Jerusalem. It also means the resumption of millions of dollars of donations to the Palestinian Authority through U.S. aid, as well as renewing significant American financial support for UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, which is essentially a training ground for terrorists. This resumption of ties and aid will empower the same useless group, the kleptocracy, that has for decades stood in the way of peace and prevented the normalization of Palestinian lives. The leadership, Mahmoud Abbas and his gang, just creamed the money off the top. Under Biden, the onus for ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will now fall back on Israel. Even if any building is done in Judea and Samaria or even part of Jerusalem, it will probably bring condemnation upon the Jewish state as being unhelpful and an obstacle to peace. This will embolden terrorist factions within the Palestinian Authority and in the Gaza Strip, which will, God forbid, take its toll in human lives and injury. The Biden administration, under very strong pressure from its progressive left wing of the Democratic Party, could even possibly recognize a state of Palestine without any concessions made by the Palestinian leaders. Biden's team has announced its intention to have America rejoin the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with the Iranian government. And I spoke about this in a previous section of the program. This agreement was designed only to postpone and make more difficult, but not stop the Iranian regime's progress toward acquiring a nuclear arsenal. Yet even before the Trump administration pulled out of the agreement and the Trump administration instituted a strong and effective set of economic sanctions against Iran, it was reported that Iran was in violation of its commitments. Iran's leader broadcast openly threats against the state of Israel and speak of eliminating Israel. Israel relates to these threats in earnest. Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, to which he relocated the U.S. Embassy. American citizens born in Jerusalem now, for the first time since the creation of the State of Israel, have Jerusalem, Israel printed on their birth certificates and passports. The Trump administration recognizes the legitimacy of Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria and Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights and the U.S. role in brokering normalization agreements between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan. The current U.S. administration's approach to two security matters, the Palestinians and Iran, was reason enough, by the way. They did a survey here of Americans living in Israel, and 70% of it favored Donald Trump over Joe Biden, and an Israeli Democracy Institute survey taken during the first week of November. By the way, and this is what's important, I mean, a lot of what I said I'd like to think is important, but this is significant. These results, that 70% of Israelis, not just Americans living in Israel, but all Israelis, 70% prefer Trump over Biden. These results, as I said, are the mirror image of the Jews in America. And the explanation is simple. A gentleman named Artie Geldman wrote about, and I want to quote what he said. The explanation of why American Jews and Israeli Jews take opposite positions vis-a-vis Joe Biden and Trump is what comes down to what's known in real estate as location, location, location. American Jews don't live in Israel. They live in America, and unlike their grandparents and great-grandparents, they are Americans first. Their significant issues are American issues. This is understandable, by the way. They don't know much about Israeli society. They don't know much about Israeli culture. They don't speak Hebrew. The Judaism of most American Jews would be unrecognizable to many Israelis. Most American Jews have never visited Israel, have no plans to visit Israel, and would prefer visiting other countries first. And the number of American Jews is in general also diminishing because of intermarriage and lack of education. Israelis must recognize that the current generation of American Jews, unlike previous generations of American Jews, for the most part, are not particularly interested in Israel, at least not in any practical sense, and to a large degree, they're not particularly Jewish as we would describe it. The present rift with the American Jewish community is likely to widen with time for the simple reason that the process is a natural one. I see all kind of articles in the newspapers about how we can tighten the relationship with American Jews. And this would have been unthinkable 50 years ago. When I was a kid, the Jews in America were much more Jewish than the Jews in America today. As I said, the rift is likely to widen with time, and the process is a natural one. It is not reversible through educational programs, as decades and millions of wasted dollars have demonstrated. Even the birthright program, which brings young people here not at their own expense, is not going to change the direction of what's happening. There should be no hard feelings, no enmity. Israelis should be thankful for the significant financial, political, and moral support of previous generations of American Jews. But Israelis must modify their expectations according to the current reality. The Israelis need to relate to Jews living in America as most today prefer to see themselves. The Jews in America see themselves as Americans first. And this is a natural thing. I'm not saying it in an accusing way. I see it as a fact, and from what I read from other people who have studied the situation, it is simply a fact. The lack of Jewish education, lack of belonging to Jewish communities, simply means that American Jews consider themselves Americans first. This is quite different from their grandparents' generation. When I grew up, Jews, even if they were not observant, felt very Jewish. Members of my family, for example, were totally not related to Judaism at all. They didn't keep kosher. They had very little Jewish education, but they knew when Rosh Hashanah was, when Yom Kippur was. Many of them went to be together with families on these occasions. By the way, the mirror image of that is here in Israel. There are people here in Israel who do not practice the Jewish religion at all, but they look forward to a Pesach Seder with their family. When I first came to Israel, I saw this as a strange phenomenon, but then I realized it's an Israeli phenomenon. I worked for a woman who was totally irreligious, and to a certain extent, she was not only indifferent, but she sort of didn't like religion, but she got together with the family for the Pesach Seder. And that way her kids still stayed involved. So what I'm saying now, we can see from the results of the American election and the way that the Jews voted, that they are more American than they are Jewish, which is fine. I'm not saying this in an accusing way. I'm saying it as factually as I can. So we'll have to see what's going to happen now. That they haven't finalized the election. It looks like Biden is the winner, and he's going to bring with him a vice president who is essentially a socialist, and that can't be too good for the United States. But that's a story unto itself. So I just wanted to share these thoughts with you, and we'll see what happens over the coming weeks and the coming months and the coming years. Everybody's predicting, everybody's an expert. Everybody's an expert on the past. Nobody's an expert on the future. Till next time, take care of yourselves.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at israelnewstalkradio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling from the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.